Welcome everyone to Africam4Good, brought to you by explore.org. My name is Russell Gerber and welcome to the show. It's great to have you with us today, where we'll be having a discussion with the head guide at Carifa Game Reserve about the wonderful and intriguing secretary bird. It's great to have him on the show today, and we're going to go into some detail on the birds themselves, what happens at Carifa, but it'll be a short little chat with this wonderful man from the Eastern Cape. So as we start all our shows, Wade, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, how's it, Russell? So I've been basically born and raised in the Eastern Cape, so an Eastern Cape boy by blood and heart. Been guiding on Carifa now for just over 10 years. At the moment, as you said, currently I'm the head guide here. So my role at the moment is basically managing the guiding team and the guest experience. Still trying to spend as much time as I can out in the bush, but still, got a bit more admin work to do nowadays, now that I've taken over the head guide role.
Yeah, that's how it goes. The more responsibility you get, the less time you get to play in the bush. I know how that goes. And I'm also an Eastern Cape man through and through, so it does have a special place in my heart, that frontier country of yours where you guys are situated. But a lot of our guests out there, of course, wouldn't really know much about Carifa and the Eastern Cape. So can you tell us a little bit about Carifa and the reserve?
Cool. I guess the Eastern Cape reserves are still a little bit under the radar, seeing that the reserves up in the north still seem to be like everybody thinks that's the place to be. For Carifa, we situated about an hour and a half drive from Port Elizabeth. And about 10 minutes drive from the coast, which is actually a beautiful location, because from the reserve we actually have the most beautiful views of the ocean, of the Indian Ocean, which is pretty cool. It's a game reserve that started about 30 years ago. It started as a small park here in the area, and then over the years it's grown. And at the moment, a really beautiful Big 5 game reserve that's thriving and doing really well.
Yeah, amazing. I've been there a couple of times. I spent a lot of my youth, trying to catch fish on the river, of course, that runs along the part of your boundary. How big is the reserve now?
So at the moment, we roughly 10,000 hectares. There's actually quite a exciting land expansion program that's on the go at the moment that will probably bring about another 2,000 hectares into the reserve. As you mentioned, the river, that's probably one of the most unique things about Carifa, is that we have the Carifa River and the Bushman's River in the east and western side of the reserve, which just adds that, variety for our guest experience, to be able to do the boat cruises, fishing, kayaking, all those sort of water activities that many other reserves can't offer.
Yeah, absolutely, as you say, and that perspective from the water to be able to see big animals like that is really quite special and unique, as you say, and certainly something I've enjoyed in my visits there. And as I say, even just heading up the river, on our own little boat trying to catch fish. But it's in a beautiful part of the world. We're both from the Eastern Cape. What do you love about working in the Eastern Cape?
I think one thing that people always will bring up is the friendliness and the relaxed sort of, what would you call it, the relaxed atmosphere in the Eastern Cape. Everybody seems to be so chilled and friendly. Another thing that I love about the area where Carifa is situated is obviously having the coast so nearby. There's not many game reserves that are 10 minutes drive from being on the beach. Which also gives it something different, something different for the area. I'd say that the main thing about the Eastern Cape is just that sort of laid back lifestyle and the friendliness of the people, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, I agreed. There's so many amazing little beach towns all along that coast. From there, Port Elizabeth through that area, there's of course Kenton and Port Alfred, and then up to East London and the Wild Coast. So a beautiful part of South Africa, and not explored a lot by our international visitors. And I would say, I'm sure you'd agree, a place where people should really think to put on their list if they're coming down to South Africa.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's becoming a lot more popular, say in the last 10 years or so, because the garden route is becoming a very popular holiday, destination for foreigners. And, being in this area where we're situated in such an awesome spot because it's basically, guests or the tourists, starting in Cape Town, ending up the end of the garden route, which is just near Port Elizabeth, and then coming here for a couple of days and then heading back home. So it is a really awesome, in an awesome location for that garden route holiday. Instead of having to go all the way up to the north to visit a reserve up there, you just end off down here in the Eastern Cape, and then off you go.
Yeah, of course. Also, a malaria-free area that a lot of people don't realize, and a great family destination for a safari as well. So yeah, I'm sure you get a few families coming through Carifa.
We do. Hey, we get a lot. Yeah, a lot of families. We have one of our lodges, well, actually two of the lodges on Carifa cater for families, which is quite nice, and that'll be kids of all ages. And then obviously the other lodges will be, a bit older kids because they're more sort of exclusive lodges. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, as I said, special place in my heart, the Eastern Cape and Carifa and that whole part of South Africa. But let's get down to what we're chatting about today, which is, of course, the very interesting secretary bird. As you are well aware, Wayne, we're in the process of setting up a bird cam at Carifa for the secretary bird nest. For those of our guests and viewers out there who don't know much about secretary birds, can you give us a little bit of background on them and what they're all about?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Definitely one of the most fascinating birds we'll get in Southern Africa, I could say. I mean, if you spend time viewing them out in the bush, you almost get to love them. They just got such a character about them. And obviously very famous for being snake hunters, feeding on a lot of other small prey and invertebrates and all that. But very famous for being snake hunters. So, snakes like the Cape Cobra, Rinkels, Puffadder, some of the most dangerous animals in the world, the secretary bird is very well known to take them out and prey on them. That's one thing that makes it so, I reckon, famous, is being the snake hunter. But it's a fascinating bird. I mean, monogamous mostly, so you'll generally see them in pairs. Always interesting to see the areas they're roosting in. They normally pick the top of a nice big acacia tree, build a nice big platform nest with some twigs and branches and all that, and that's where they'll make their nest site. And it's always, I mean, for me as a guide over the years, I always like to observe animals and watch animals and all that, and to watch the secretary birds, how they, spend time on the ground collecting twigs and sticks and all that, taking them back up to the nest, working hard, and then eventually seeing a chick being born and hanging out with the adults and learning how to hunt and all that. It's a very cool bird to watch out in the bush.
Yeah, I agree. They are so unique and different, especially for a big, easily recognizable bird of prey. As you say, for a lot of people, a favorite that they get to see. Let's put this to bed once and for all, though, Wayne. How did the secretary bird get that name?
There's a few different theories, put it that way. So the older theory is the quill-like feathers it has on the top of his head represents the quill pens that secretaries used to use back in the day, whether it was a male or a female. And then there's the newer theory. I think it's got to do with a French word meaning hunter or great hunter, because the secretary bird is such a skilled hunter. So that is one of the other theories. And I know the scientific word, or the Latin word for the secretary bird, refers to Sagittarius, who was an archer. And then the other word, the serpentine part of the Latin word, meaning obviously snake hunter or reptile hunter. So that's quite pretty cool, scientific word he has got. But yeah, I mean, generally with my guests I take out, I'll always refer to the quill-like feathers on the head, representing the pens tucked down the ear of a secretary, which always makes a lot of sense to me, and the guests always seem to be able to understand that one quite nicely.
Yeah, I agree. We'll let our guests, our viewers, decide what they think is the best explanation. But yeah, as you say, it's an interesting thing that there's always been a little bit of debate about where that name came from. Yeah, so I mean, exactly. You've mentioned secretary birds. One of your favorite birds of prey to see out on the reserve. Do you have any special sightings that stick out with you?
Sure. I've seen a couple of secretary bird kills, if you'd want to call it that. One that will stick out to me a couple of years ago. We watched one actually with some guests. We watched one catching a puffadder and killing a puffadder. Now, for those or people out there that haven't seen that happening, how the secretary bird does it, it's got extremely long legs, full of scales. So that obviously protects the legs from being struck or bitten by the puffadder or venomous snakes. He opens his wings out, or it'll open its wings out to startle the snake a bit, so it's not too sure where to strike and what to go for. And then the secretary bird will generally kill the larger snakes by stepping very hard on their back or head area, which will break the backbone or just, concuss it or kill it by such a hard blow to the head. And then we actually watched it feeding on the puffadder for about 25 minutes. Which was pretty cool. So the smaller snakes, they'll generally just swallow like a piece of spaghetti. And the bigger snakes, they'll actually feed on, and you'll often have remains of the carcass left over after they've done feeding. So that one definitely as a highlight secretary bird sighting, that one will always definitely stick out.
Yeah, well, that sounds pretty special. I'd say that would stick out for me as well.
Yeah.
I've seen secretary birds getting some small snakes before. As you said, it really is funny. It is just looking like one giant piece of spaghetti going down the throat. So I think we actually have some of those that we've caught on camera, but we'll have to go through our records and see what we got. What other special things have you seen out on Carifa? What are some of your other favorites? Obviously, there's the big mammals that are always favorites of everyone, but for you at Carifa, what would have been your sightings that have stood out to you?
Sure. So many, but if I'd have to narrow it down to a few, I'm a big lover of birds. That's one of my passions in the bush is the birding. And in the area, I don't know how many people know about the bird, the Narina trogon. It's one of almost like the leopards of the bird species, all of the elusive one that's very difficult to find. And my first sighting I had a month or two after I started guiding on the reserve. It's the first time I ever saw one. And that always really sticks out to me. It's such an exceptionally beautiful bird with the bright red chest and the green head and back. It's really, really special. So that'll always stick out to me. And then, other sightings like seeing the smaller stuff. I got to see my first honey badger sighting on Carifa, which is a adult female and a youngster just trotting down the road, minding their own business. But then as I'd say, if I could move on to the larger animals, something that always sticks out to me is viewing elephants around water. That's always something that seems to, it's one of those sightings that just makes you live in the moment and you forget about everything else around you, what's happening in the world, and you just enjoy what's happening in front of you. And even for the guests, I always think it's one of the highlights of a stay or a safari if you ever get to witness a herd of elephants around a waterhole, whether they're in the water, swimming or wallowing or spraying water and mud over their bodies. It's always a great thing to see.
Yeah, the same. For our viewers as well, we often get comments about it. That watching the elephants in the water is always fun and never gets old. So, a big favorite for us too. The guys who were just putting in the camera, they've in the process, as you know, of still going through all that and getting it all set up. But they actually, when testing the camera, spotted a caracal, I believe. Do you see them often on the reserve, or is it as rare as in other places in the country?
Yeah, they are around. It's one of those things like, on one game drive, you might get to see 2 or 3, then you might not see one for another month or 2. So we do have a healthy population. Exact numbers I wouldn't be too sure about, but there is a healthy population. And I reckon down here in this region, we would get more sightings in the game reserves would get up in the north. They seem to be a little bit more sort of, the population seems to be a bit better down here than it would be up there. And obviously a lot of prey species for them down here, all the hares and spring hares, monkeys, and all the bird life and stuff. So I think it's a perfect habitat for them in this Eastern Cape thicket area.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. I've seen quite a few caracal on my own and on holiday, and just spending time in the wild there. But funnily enough, in game reserves where I've worked in Kruger area up in the northern KZN, even Botswana, I've seen very, very few. I can probably count on one hand the amount of caracal I've seen, and I know I've heard from a lot of my colleagues in the Eastern Cape area that you do see them quite often, which is pretty cool and quite different to what we're used to in other parts.
Definitely, yeah.
So having said that, we mentioned some of your, favorite things that you've seen, things that have stuck out on the reserve as sightings. Always a very difficult question for a guide, but off the top of your head, first thing that comes to mind, what's been your favorite animal sighting at Carifa?
Sure, that is a difficult one, but I reckon the top one would have been, I'd say a couple of, when was it? And during lockdown, we got to find female lioness moving her new cubs. That was probably one of the highlights of my career. We sat in one spot for probably 2.5 to 3 hours, and we waited there. So she moved, one cub came back, about 45 minutes later, fetched the other cub, and the cubs were in a little thicket just about 5 meters to the side of the car. And yeah, just to witness that was incredible. And she was obviously relocating them from one, site to another, where she felt they needed to move to, where they'd be more safe or whatnot. But that was very special to witness that, for sure. That's one thing that'll always stick out to me in the bush.
Well, yeah, I mean, that sounds amazing. It's a tough one. I know, I feel the same. There's a million different sightings that I can remember, but there's always one, if somebody puts you on the spot, that sort of jumps to the surface. So that one sounds pretty amazing to see cubs being moved.
Yeah.
So on Africam4Good, we always want to mention conservation work. Is Carifa involved in any community or conservation projects? Could you please tell us about some of those?
Yeah, sure. So they've been involved in conservation and community projects for quite a few years. But I'd say about 6 or 7 years ago, they really started to put a lot of effort into it. So the Carifa Foundation runs that, and it's all conservation and community based. Obviously, I mean that's what they're pushing at the moment. Projects that they're running would be food relief for the local communities. Obviously since COVID, the local communities with jobs and all that, they've been battling a lot. So the food relief program has been pretty big. And then we've also opened up recently the Carifa Conservation Center, which is based in the southwestern side of the property, and they are open to all sorts of education projects and stuff like that with the local community. So they do a lot of, bring out kids from the area and do lots of game drives and just educational things in that area. And other things, obviously, I'd say the anti-poaching is probably one of the biggest things that the foundation will focus on. In the last 10 years, with the rhino poaching being such a big problem in Africa, and during COVID, obviously with the lack of funds and all that sort of thing, we have got I'll tell you right now, the Save the Rhino basically fund thing going, which is just to raise funds to make sure that our anti-poaching unit can stay on the ground and, can continue to protect these amazing beasts of ours that are sadly being taken out by these poachers. So yeah, there is a lot of effort and stuff being put into the community and the conservation side. I mentioned a little bit earlier, we have a new sort of land expansion project, which is on the go at the moment, which to, increase the size of the property and also introduce new species onto the reserve, which is very exciting for us. Something possibly like cheetah, which Carifa hasn't had in the past. We with the reserve growing and being more plains in the southwestern side of the property, it's possibly something we can look at, and introducing some other animals like spotted hyena, maybe another pride of lions, and things like that, which should be very exciting. So that's another big project that's on the go at the moment to do with the conservation side of the reserve. And yeah, obviously lots of work that goes on with the rhinos, especially the dehorning. That's one of the big things that we try to put a lot of effort into. And just improving the technology on the reserve with cameras all around the property to help the anti-poaching guys and stuff like that. Yeah.
Awesome. And if any of our guests out there are interested in, or our viewers, if they're interested in actually helping out, how can they go about doing that?
So I reckon the best bet is on the Carifa webpage. So it's just www.carifa.co.za. And on there, they can bring up the page on our foundation, Carifa Foundation, and all the information's on there. There's all sorts of different organizations that, there can be donations made towards and stuff. So yeah, all the information will be found can be found on the website.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Wayne, for chatting with us today. It's obviously, so fun for me to chat to a fellow Eastern Caper, especially an Eastern Cape guide. And it'll be great to catch up with you guys on the camera. Can't wait to see how that's going to come out and
yeah, for sure.
what interesting stuff we'll catch on there. But yeah, all the best with your expansion, and hopefully we'll get out there soon and can pop in and say hi. But we'll keep an eye out for you guys on the cameras and keep up the good work.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Russell. Yeah, nice chatting. Cool.
And thank you all once again for joining us for Africam4Good, brought to you by explore.org. Please join us again next week for the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay informed for any of our upcoming show. But from all of us in the Africam team, it's cheers for now.